and welcome everybody to the Women in Associations webinar. My name is Marissa Lopez. I am a member of the Association Latinos Professional Development Committee and an association executive at EDI here in Milwaukee. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we look forward to having a lively discussion with the panelists. And just a few housekeeping rules I want to kind of go over. As we go through this webinar, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to put those in the chat box. We'll keep checking back and answer those throughout, or save those for the end of the webinar. For those of you new to our events, Association Latinos is an online community whose mission is to advance Latino leadership in associations and partner with organizations to foster diversity and inclusion efforts. We work within our community and with allies to advance Latino leadership, representation, and inclusion in associations. If you haven't already done so, please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. We invite you to do so, and our other social media platforms, including Facebook and Twitter. And what we'll do throughout is include the LinkedIn sites for some of our panelists so that you can connect with them after the webinar. As I've mentioned, today's event focuses on women in associations. You'll hear from 5 dynamic professionals covering all stages of careers, and we're all here to share our perspectives and advice with one another. So to get us started, I will introduce you to our panelists for the evening, beginning with Abigail Bayer. She is the Senior Manager of Membership and Marketing for the American Association of Veterinary State Boards. Cynthia De Jesus, she's a Senior Account Executive at High Road Solutions. Josie Hernandez, she's an Account Executive and Executive Director at Bostrom, and also the President of Association Latinos. Sophia Loza, who is the Senior Accountant for Yoga Alliance, and Josie Prudencio, who is the Vice President of Finance for Yoga Alliance. So welcome, ladies, and we'll get started. So Abby, one of the questions I have for you is tell us a little bit about how you got into the association industry and what sustains you in the industry now.
Sure. So I think, like many other people, I got into the association industry kind of by chance. So I started pretty young. I think a lot of people start a little bit later in their careers, but I needed to do an internship to finish my undergrad degree. And I was looking around some places that I could fulfill the internship, and I found an association here in Tallahassee where I live. And, I went in for an interview, I got the role, and it was just supposed to be like a summer internship, like nothing really special. And then I actually really enjoyed it. And so, they also enjoyed me being there. And so the internship kind of evolved into, do you want to stay here a little bit longer? And then it went from that to like, do you want to stay here full time? And then it just sort of evolved further and further from there, because I realized I really love being in the association world. So that was kind of how it started. Now, there's so much that I've kind of immersed myself into. Around the same time that I had started, I also was looking around for other opportunities to get more involved. And now just my involvement kind of stretches beyond the state level. And I've had the opportunity to be involved in more national level things as well. So it's been an incredible experience. And I'm really happy that it's given me so much that I can be proud of, at the end of the day. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
Thank you. Cynthia, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so mine was, like Abby said, mine started later in my career. I actually came from lots of different jobs along that route. I worked as a mortgage processor, and one of my old colleagues started a services company here in the association space, and he reached out to me and said he needed somebody, and he was like, I know your work ethic, and I know that you do well, and you should come work with associations. And I was like, I know nothing about an association. And he was like, you just need to have your personality and you'll succeed. And he was right. I've had the best time of my life. I've made some of the best friends. I've grown in my career that more than I think I would have otherwise. So yeah, it's just been a lot of fun. My husband always says that I can't complain about work because I work with all my friends and I get to go to summer school every day. So
No, that's awesome. Thank you. Josie, how about you? Josie H, I should say.
Josie H, yeah. Yeah, so actually I was a career changer. This is a second career for me. I was actually already 40 when I started in associations. And so first half of my career was spent in the retail industry. I really loved it. I had worked for a company for a long time and they went out of business. At that time when they went out of business, I had just had my daughter. She was about 3 years old. So I decided to stay home. But I knew I could only stay home so long. So I stayed home for a year. Then I took a part-time job to keep me working. And then when I decided I wanted to, venture back out, it was actually a friend who was working at an association. They had an opening. And so I went for the interview, actually didn't get that position, but they called me back for a different position. And that's how I started in associations. And what keeps me going now is that I love what I'm doing, right? It's great work. Being from the retail sales side, I kind of liken it to a similar theme where you create a plan, your strategic plan, and you create your, all of your different touch points and things that you're going to do to achieve your goal. So it's kind of like getting ready for a huge sale, right? You set your goal, you do everything you have to do, and then you achieve it. And that to me is very exciting. So in terms of the work, I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And then what keeps me going and what keeps me motivated is the work that I'm doing also as a volunteer with Association Latinos, with Association Forum and ASAE, and helping people, build their networks and being supportive of each other, because that has also helped me and helped me advance my career as well.
Thank you. Sophia, how about you tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry and your journey?
Yes. So I got to the United States around 8 years ago, and I would say that life kind of threw me into the accounting world, which later opened the doors for me to work for Yoga Alliance. I started my career working in the hospitality and retail section. So it was a lot of learning curve for me once I changed to working for an association. To be honest, it was an amazing change. I was like so grateful that I had it and that I took it. And I would say that finally I can work like with a group of colleagues that work towards a mission, a purpose, which in our case is like evolving like the profession of yoga teachers in schools. Recently I become a yoga frenetic. I am enjoying yoga so much since the beginning of this year, and I'm always telling myself, I don't know how I didn't got into this earlier and working for the industry. So it's like I read it somewhere there that it's joining an association is more than just, a job. It's like you're joining a community, and that's like so true.
Thank you. And Josie, how about you?
Hi, thank you. So I've been in nonprofits and accounting in the DC area for well over 20 years. But I started my career having graduated in accounting and finance and not really wanting to do accounting and finance, and found a software developer actually that created association management software systems. And they needed somebody to talk to liaison between the programmers and the accountants and the associations. And I didn't know anything about associations, and I didn't really know anything about programming. So talk about a learning curve. In a matter of months, I really had to get up to speed on both relatively quickly. But they both set a really great foundation for the rest of my career. I was able to use the tools that I learned during my first job out of college. I've worked for a $50 million association. The Mortgage Bankers Association was my first management position in finance. So now I get to work with the Yoga Alliance as the head of the finance department. And I feel that I thrive the most in associations. I've worked in all types of nonprofits, but I for me, what really drives, and as Sophia has just said, we work together. So there's a lot of similarities in the way that we think, but for me, it's about building community and really supporting the profession and supporting other individuals and making those connections that gives a little more value to my work. And so that's why I continue to thrive and want to continue in associations. Last year, I was able to get my CAE, which solidifies my desire to be in this space and in this industry. And for me, that was an amazing experience to study for that certification. For me, it was much more about the learning process of what was in the exam and the content that came with it, and the group of people that I had 2 study groups for studying for that exam. So the group of people that I met and saw their desire and want to be in the association space, that really just made me want to continue to look further into associations. And so as some other panelists here, I went to the annual meeting for ASAE this past summer for the very first time. And that's where I met Association Latinos, and just continue to just love this community building that really is a very strong characteristics of associations.
Thank you for sharing. Cynthia, I want to move it over to you and just talk a little bit about what unique lens does being a Latina provide for you in the workplace, and what are some of the ways that you feel your personal background strengthens your professional role?
Yeah, so it's funny, I am one of 3 girls. My mom is one of 3 girls. I have 3 girls. So it's ingrained in me to be women empowerment, and it's just always been a really important feature, aspect of my career. So I'm always when people are like, hey guys, and I'm like, and ladies, I always feel like I have to advocate. So like many people, I've attended ASAE annual several times, but met Association Latinos there last year. So when I was able to bring those worlds together and not only advocate for women, but also Latinas, it actually was very exciting. So I've been fangirling over the group for a good long while. So I will say, as far as my career, it's opened a lot of doors, not necessarily open doors, but I feel like there's always that, I was a daughter of an immigrant that came, on his own with 17 years old and tried to make his way. So my goal was always to accomplish more than he did for him. I have this week with me my 95-year-old grandmother. So she's gotten to see me working. And so to be able to show her these things, it's exciting. And so for me, it's always been a matter of showing my girls that with grit and hard work and recognition, you'll get there. And so I always the forefront of everything is and you're a woman, you shouldn't be the odds are that you wouldn't be in this position, or you're Latina, you shouldn't be in this position. Your last name is De Jesus, right? It's not always the top of the list. So yeah, just doing it for them is really what's opened doors for me.
Thank you. And Abby, how about you? What are some ways in which you feel your personal background has strengthened your professional role?
Yeah, so I think honestly, a lot of it does come from childhood experiences and just things that I've kind of lived. So, our culture is very full of passion and energy, and, we kind of live our lives very passionately and full of life and real energy. And so that kind of carries over into everything, and that includes our work. And so I love feeling like I'm putting everything that I have into the work that I can do every day. And if I wasn't able to do that, then I don't think I'd be satisfied, being in this industry. And then I think more kind of on a personal level, I'm pretty selfless. I think of others a lot before I think of myself, which also translates really well into this field, because associations really kind of boil down into their essence is equipping other people with the tools and knowledge they need to do their job well. And I love being able to do that, you know, even if I'm not an expert in a certain field or, you know, have like the credentials or whatever, you know, to be like a doctor or a lawyer, like I still get to, you know, be exposed to that and help those people, you know, get the information they need to advocate for others as well. So it's kind of a good combination, you know, it feels really natural that a lot of what I've lived has allowed me to be in this position today.
Thank you. Sophia, how would you advise someone who wants to move into your position? Are there any tips that you can share with the audience?
Yes. I think I will let them know that to be eager to learn and always find other people to connect with within the organization, not just the department, their department, our department. Probably I would tell them to aim high and have a lot of confidence in themselves. I would also encourage them like to practice good time management and always to prioritize, let them know to prioritize like their time, health, which is very important. Like we need to be like mentally and physically okay for us, you know, to perform well in every aspect of your life, work in the workplace, home. I would recommend to set daily goals and try to achieve the most of them that they can, and just unplug from all computers, screens, social media. Yeah, it's always healthy to take breaks and like recharge batteries. So yeah.
Definitely. Josie H., how about you? What are some tips or advice you would give someone who wants to move into this position or this industry?
So I think if you want to move up in your career, right? I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I could give is to volunteer and get involved outside of your organization. So if you are working in an association and you have a goal to advance your career, I really found it for me to be transformational when I got involved and started volunteering, because what you do is you expand your network outside of the people within your organization. Oftentimes as Latinos, I know that this was true for me, you know, that I always say my work will speak for itself. You know, my work speaks for me and I will advance because of my work and being really focused on my work output and my work ethic. And that is true to a certain extent, but there are so many other things that come into play when you're talking about building your career. And if you think about it and you limit yourself to only allowing the people within your organization to know about you and what you have to offer and your skills, you're limiting yourself to what's available there. And many times growth is limited within an organization. There may not be opportunities to move up. I worked at one place where we had a staff meeting where they basically just said that there were limited opportunities for advancement. So if you were someone that really wanted to move up, you really had to make a decision as to whether or not you wanted to stay or leave. And what you do when you volunteer with people who have the same type of work that you do, you are then allowing a whole other group of people to get to know you, get to know your work ethic, get to know your skills and your talent. And when they know of opportunities, then they can think about you for those opportunities. So there are many things that, you know, come into place. I think a lot of the things that Sophia said applied, but really one of the difference makers that I think we often don't think about or are not aware of is what the impact of having a network and building that network can make on your career.
Definitely. Do any of the other panelists want to add anything to that? Sure, Josie.
Sure, I'd love to. I wrote in the chat, networking is absolutely key. And I also think that if you can find somebody in the association space that you admire, that you have seen their work, that you like how they do their work and the leadership that they have, reach out to them. People in associations are so kind. They truly are. And it really is this community building atmosphere, and they work to promote professions. So why not help somebody within the association profession. I have a story. I met briefly Juan Amador at the National Convention in Nashville this past summer. And I was shy. I was like, oh, I'd love to reach out to him, say hi, get to know him, and finally got the opportunity to do so. And I said, I'd really just love to have a mentoring session with you. And he was so kind and so wonderful and gave me wonderful tips about how to continue to grow within this industry. So you won't get a no if you don't ask. And if you find if you find a person to really admire, you admire the work that they're doing, just reach out, find a way to reach, especially if they're leaders. Usually their contact information is on the website for the association that they work for, or look for them in LinkedIn. And that's what I did. I reached out to Juan through LinkedIn. And he answered back. So I think that, if you can find a mentor, even if it's just you asking and it's not somebody offering, that also can go a really, really long way.
And I agree with that. Over the weekend, we attended Association Forum's Women's Forum on Friday, and there was someone I had went up to, and I had asked her, can I send you a message on LinkedIn? And she's like, just take my phone number. And I thought, oh, okay. So I think that networking is so important. And I agree with you, Josie. People in associations are so warm and kind. And I think, some things I've been hearing just in us discussing is community, right? Building that community, building that networking, creating that safe space where we can have these discussions and conversations. And that's the one step in this, right? So I think for some of us who, let's say maybe CEO is not what we aspire to, there's so many other avenues within the association field that we can find our place, and we can, find a career within. And so that kind of just leads me to talk more about the challenges and work-life pressures. And the first question I have is, what obstacles are preventing women from advancing into leadership positions, and maybe if not leadership positions, but into that next phase within our journeys? And so I'll start with you, Cynthia, if you can kind of just share a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's funny. I've primarily worked in a lot of male-dominated careers. Like my first job in high school, I was installing car radios. I worked in construction fields with like hard hats and steel toe boots. And so I've always been, one of the only women, or the only Spanish woman. So for me, it's always been a matter of speaking up, right? Like we're so afraid to ask. And like Josie had said, I remember vividly in an interview being asked about my pay salary, or like a range that I was comfortable with. And I was like, oh, whatever you think I'm worth, right? Like I'll fit right in that box. And then you find out that people come in after you with less experience and have asked for more, and have gotten more because they've asked for it. And so I recently heard somebody talk about going in for a raise and being scared to ask for the raise or a promotion. And a lot of times that's all it takes, is just to ask. The positions are there, the salaries are there, and we just need to find the path to get there. So I 100% agree with the networking piece, because people want to help people that they like and people that they know, and they want to hold your hand and say, this is how I did it, and I can show you the way. And I think that's one of the things that I think is hard with less women in leadership and less Latinos in leadership, is having that person to look up to. And so when you find them, ask, talk to them, invite them, like all of the things. And it's so satisfying. Like I've had people reach out to me and I'm like, I'm just like a mom, right? Like, why are you coming to me? And then you help people, and it's very satisfying as a person to have somebody reach out and want to get advice or mentoring. So it's like comes full circle. And I think that, to me, I would say is probably the biggest obstacle that I've seen or encountered, is just being afraid to ask or waiting for the recognition rather than stepping up.
Thank you. Josie H., I saw your hand come up.
Oh, I was clapping at what you were saying, but
Oh.
yeah, I was like, I was gonna say, I want to jump in on this. I totally agree with what Cynthia said. And the other thing is, she gave an example in terms of pay, but is also like letting people know that you want to move up. So it's like, making that known. I think we're so intimidated maybe sometimes, or we want to be asked versus us asking, that what ends up happening is it takes us much longer to get there. So I say, letting people know that you have aspirations, that you're interested, and then that way they know, and you can also give yourself some time, right? They can give you feedback if there are skills that you need to develop. You can also then make a choice as to whether or not you stay where you are, or you might look for a different opportunity that might give you some additional skills, or where there'll be more room for growth. One of the things I've also learned over time is that person, your direct report, or someone in leadership also should be someone that wants to see you succeed, right? And that really makes a difference in your ability to move up and get other opportunities. And you may find yourself not in that situation, and that's when you have to, it's important, I think, to vocalize what your aspirations are, and then also sometimes, do some analysis and decide if you need to make a move or not to be able to get to where you are. I can say that I made a move in my career, and the time I spent in between becoming an executive director really prepared me for this position. And I'm not sure that it would have happened for me if I had not made that move.
Thank you. Abby?
Yeah, so Josie and Cynthia kind of talked a little bit about like advocacy from, internally and externally, but I think also a lot of what we see happening with women and just that kind of barrier to leadership is existing biases, even if they're unconscious, because just male-dominated industries, like it's still an issue, right? But women have a lot of stigmas associated with them and with us, really. So a lot of times there's like too much of something, right? When it comes to women, like being too emotional or being like too outspoken. But it's really interesting because it's a lot of times you kind of think about like, well, what example, right, is leading people to think like they're too emotional or too outspoken, but is it really situations where being too emotional is actually having a lot of emotional intelligence, or is being too outspoken actually an instance where someone was confident and spoke up about something that no one else wanted to talk about or address, but it needed to be addressed. And it's just interesting because those are all characteristics of a good leader. And so it's just, what is that invisible barrier that for some reason, men can exhibit these traits, but when women do it, it's to this. So I think just kind of having more advocacy, it still kind of feeds back into, having those people around you to support you and kind of encourage you to say those things or, treat those things in a certain way. Because I mean, men and women are different and we just have different approaches to things, and that's totally fine. But it is definitely doing everybody in every industry a disservice to just not think about ways that women can bring a different perspective to things. So.
Excellent, thank you. Josie and then Sophia, I think everyone's input here is so valuable, so please go ahead.
So all of those barriers are correct. Women in leadership roles. I also think there's a dynamic about being Latino and speaking a foreign language. And this isn't specifically just for Latinos, but it's for anybody who speaks a foreign language. There's this stigma that you're a foreigner, not from this country. And I think that does create barriers for people trying to move into leadership roles, because it's like they don't belong, like they're outsiders, especially here in the United States. And so I think the solution for that, right, is we can say these are all barriers, but we have to try to find solutions and find ways to get around these barriers. And I think it comes to education, and having people in leadership roles really, like, especially with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and now belonging, education that is thriving in the association industry. comes that awareness and education around the benefits of being able to speak multiple languages and have the input from multiple cultures to be able to make better decisions that are more inclusive for all the types of people that are members to any given association. So I do feel that has been a barrier. I'm hoping with all of this diversity, equity, and inclusion education that is currently happening, that the belonging piece of it is going to come around and start making this a little bit easier. But I do feel that the minute you speak another language, especially if you speak the other language in the workplace, it makes people uncomfortable. And it should be very much so, Carlos, as you're saying, a superpower. It should be honored and celebrated and used to the advantages of the associations. But I think to some extent, there is still some stigma associated to that we need to help people, overcome.
Thank you. And then Sophia.
I think that balancing work and family can be a challenge that limits a women from maybe seeking leadership roles. You also see maybe old stereotypes of some women maybe thinking that men are more suitable for certain leadership positions than women. So these are the ideas that I think we should work on, getting out of our head, because it shouldn't be like that. Then you also see subjects such as sexual harassment, hostile work environments. These are still being obstacles, and I think that women of color face even further obstacles to their advancement, and as a result, even likely to move into or even less likelihood to move into leadership roles. In Yoga Alliance, we recently had this training that was called Behaviors of Inclusion, I think, Josie. And we talked a lot about bias, and that's the first thing that came to my mind when we start talking about this subject. So yeah, I would say that one of the significant barriers that female leaders face is the unconscious and subconscious bias. And this is also another factor that can be a barrier for them to grow on their professional advancement. Bias can also manifest towards women that act, speak up, or dress in a certain way. So yeah, there's still a lot of progress to do on this aspect.
Thank you. Thank you all for, sharing your input in this area. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about finding balance. And how do you balance career, personal life, and passions? And is there such a thing as balance? I know in thinking about who we are now versus pre-pandemic, so it's been an evolution, but I'd like to hear a little bit from each of you about how you find balance in, or what do you do along those lines? So I think we'll start here with Cynthia.
I don't know that there's such a thing as balance. So it's funny because my husband is a barber, so he runs his own business. He's, not available during the times that I need him on the weekends when I'm running kids around and things like that. I think the way that I've found balance is learning to say no and setting boundaries. And recently, I decided to study for my CAE that I'm going to sit for in May. And when I decided that, I let everybody know I am unavailable for all things. I've always been mom first. I've always been the chef, the chauffeur, all the things, friends, advice, all of the things. And I was no, now it's my turn. And so it's just a matter of setting boundaries and saying no. I think for me has been the most empowering, because I also am a people pleaser, right? People think that I'm very social. I'm just a people pleaser. So I don't like to say no. So that was really hard for me, but I think it's been what's helped me balance things, because I do still want to see my family. I do still want to go out and do things and, hang out and socialize and all those things, but I have priorities. And so I have to decide what is on my priority list today. And like Sophia said, set my daily goals. and these are what I'm accomplishing today. And if it's not going to get me to my goal, then I need to move on to the next thing and keep the trains on track.
Thank you. Abby, how about you? How do you balance career, personal life, and passions?
I think it's difficult, but I don't know. I don't know if I would say there isn't such a thing as balance. I think I would say that there is, but it just is different for everybody. Like everybody has their own sense of, how much time they can spend and, their priorities of life. So, I think first and foremost, if you love what you do, like if you truly have a passion for your work, it's not always going to feel like work. And I say it's not always, because there are times where it's going to feel like work, like you can't avoid it. It's work, but there's a way to not feel overly drained at the end of each day and that sort of thing. I think time management is extremely important, and, listening to people around you. Like if you have your friends and family telling you, like, hey, I think you're spending a lot of time at work, like we haven't really been able to see you or talk to you, like that's important feedback. And I think it's really good to kind of do a check-in with yourself every once in a while to see like, how are you feeling and how are people around you feeling? Because if you have people telling you they haven't been able to see you, like maybe it is time to kind of take a step back, or, if you feel like you're drowning in a lot of different projects and responsibilities, taking a step back there as well, and just being honest with yourself and what you can actually put onto your plate. Because I know everything's exciting, and, there's so many things that you could be filling your time with, but I think there is such a thing as too much. So just being mindful of that, and just finding that balance really of like in between overdoing it and underdoing it. Because I think, there's a possibility where you can overexert yourself too much, but I also do think that it's a slippery slope and you could be kind of underperforming, or not really utilizing your skills or your time to the best ability. So just finding that is really important. And then, everybody's way of kind of handling that is different. There's some people who just kind of put themselves into like hands-on hobbies. There's people who, they work out. There's people who just go spend time with friends and family. Like whatever works for you is really the best way. I think it's good to have a kind of a mix of all of those, because I think if you do too much of like one thing too, it can be a little overwhelming, and it might like kind of lose its sparkle and everything. So just being mindful of that. It's challenging at times, but it's possible. It's definitely possible to be able to give a little bit to all of the things that you need to be doing. So
Thank you. Sophia, how do you invest in areas of your life outside of your job?
Well, besides being a full-time working mom, I start investing like 1 hour in practicing yoga, 1 hour a week practicing yoga. So far, I love it, and I am looking to increase that hour, maybe working 2-3 hours a week. As a mom of a 3-year-old, like I invest a lot of time after work in creating activities with my daughter, doing a lot of crafts with her, like manual crafts. I teach her Spanish, and I try to spend spend lots of time with her, more outdoors than indoors, especially now that the weather is getting nice. But yeah, for me, in regards to the balance, is like I think that balance is not something you can find. It's most something you have to create for yourself. And like being like an octopus, like having all these many chores and things to do, and one day you have like certain amount of hours that you need to like create a schedule for. And like personally, like I have a big calendar in my kitchen, and like it's every month it's being updated, and we focus on like accomplishing everything that it has to be done during that day. We try our best. But that's the best way we find balance, and that's how I can also see open spaces for me to look for other activities I can do to invest on my health, mental health, and on my family.
Thank you. Josie H. and then Josie P.
Okay, so in terms of work-life balance, I have a couple things I want to share about this. Definitely in terms of everyday, well, I think it's also prioritizing, right? So there may be different priorities you have at different points in time. So that means that maybe you can only, you only have the capacity to get involved in one, additional activity to your work, right? So that you can balance your family life as well. So in terms of that, also, this may be a difficult concept because you may want to achieve something right now, but also look at it in terms of your career, right? And also look at it in terms of the age of your children, if that's part of the work-life balance, which I think is a big part of it for Latina women, right? And know that at different times, you're going to have more time and less time, and to, utilize your time when you have that more time to the best of your advantage. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is one thing I want to talk about we haven't touched about is our perception and the way we look at work. I can share that for myself, and I think it's common with many Latinas. I go to sleep thinking about what I need to do the next day in the morning, and I wake up ready to do it, anxious to do it, wanting to get to it. And so what happens then is we think so much about our work product, right? That we want to be so good at what we do, that we have these expectations that we set for ourselves because we want to succeed and have a successful career. And sometimes we think that we have to achieve at a level that maybe is greater than others. We need to challenge those thoughts. Sometimes it's hard to do. And what I say is when we're not making time for ourselves, when we're not making time to exercise or to go to the doctor or to do other things, we need to challenge those thoughts, because sometimes we need to realize that we're the only ones putting those expectations on ourselves. And I know it's really hard because this is kind of my life, right? And what I'm challenging myself with now is, making sure that we create space, and that that there's time for everything, that there is, do we need to put in so many hours at work, whereas maybe we can take an hour out to take care of ourselves and put that balance in. So it's also, challenging our thoughts and approach about the work that we do and where that priority is.
Thank you. And Josie. I think you're muted, Josie.
Yeah. Trying to find the button. I thought the space bar was going to work and it didn't. So I think I'm with Cynthia, and for me, balance has always been a little bit on the harder side. I've always worked for, I think it has a lot to do with the organization that you work for, and the value that they give work-life balance as well. So those are always really good questions to ask. I know people are afraid to ask usually in interviews, but to try to understand where the organization comes in on work-life balance. Because I've worked for several organizations when my kids were very young that expected me to be in the office 70 hours a week. And it's not tenable. And you lose a lot of moments, and then you end up resenting the organization, resenting your career choices. So I think I've struggled with finding balance because I've worked in organizations that have really not allowed me to have that space to find the personal balance. And I did find myself moving, as Josie had suggested earlier, that if you're working for an organization that doesn't have the same values as you do, you end up leaving. I think the other thing that we're faced with as women and as Latinos is that there are life changes. You get married, you have children, you study, or you decide to go back to school. There are major transitions that happen in life, and in our culture, you depend heavily on the women to get you through those life changes, the personal life changes. And so I think working with an organization that understands that also helps. Right now at Yoga Alliance, they are very understanding in that front, and they give you space to be able to take care of yourself, especially when you're having major life transitions. So I think the organization that you work for is key. I also think that as you're finding balance, absolutely, one mindfulness, as Sophia and Abby were saying, finding time to look inward and to continue to grow, but also trying to find time to continue to educate yourself and to continue to grow, because the profession, whichever piece of association industry you're in, there's constant change, and you have to keep abreast in order to continue to grow within the industry. So it's not just excelling within your organization, but it's within your field of how your function within the association, continuing to grow with that, and then still finding the time for the exercise and the mindfulness and the family. Like, for me, it's overwhelming. I have to stop myself, and I do have to listen to family members, as Abby said, like, when they're like, hey, we need you to check in, we need you to tone it back with work. It feels like it's getting out of hand. I've had that support in my life. It's been incredibly valuable to me, to have people sort of say, hey, like, let's check in. Are you doing okay? So I think you do need to surround yourself as well with good people that are going to help you out. But I think overall, like, that's probably one of the things that I've struggled with the most is balance. Because I am ambitious, and I have a lot of passion, and my passion always shows up in my work. I've worked for so many different types of nonprofits, and I have aligned with every single mission and every single effort that they put forth. And so I'm gung ho, and I want to see the organization succeed. I want to succeed. And then you come home and you have the babies, like, Mommy, we want you. So it's stressful, and you get to a point where, you have to work really hard to give yourself this space, as Cynthia said, which I had to do last year as well for the CAE, to give yourself this space and the recognition that, you also need the time. So I think it's hard. I think that, women should depend on each other to be able to, I can't tell you how many of my friends and colleagues I've called up and said, I'm having a hard time right now. And they give advice and they listen. Sometimes it's just listen. And with me saying the things that I'm saying that I'm actually struggling with and having a hard time finding balance with, just hearing myself, I'm like, wait a minute, like, the solution is right there. And I just needed somebody to hear me, and I could figure it out. So I think it's a hard topic, and one that I know that I personally have been struggling with.
Thank you for sharing, and thank all of you for sharing. I think finding balance is an evolution, right? Pre-pandemic, I could have told you this, but I think in reflecting after, as we're still kind of moving out of, the pandemic and finding balance and what that means for us, groups like Association Latinos, for example, I think have come along and just, again, for my own well-being, have created opportunities where we can network and have community and kind of discuss these very common themes, right? That I think for many of us, we've kind of kept to ourselves with it. And we find that, I think, to Josie, something Josie H had said before is, my work will speak for itself. So I'll just keep working hard. But I think we've heard from others as well, if you don't advocate for yourself, it's going to take a lot longer at times. And so I think finding these communities, finding balance, and being able to, say no, create some boundaries. I think it's kind of this melting pot of information that, depending on what stage of our journey we're in, we need to kind of take a moment, pause, and reflect on that and think about that a little bit. But I think everything you all mentioned really resonates with me, and also at different stages of my career along the way as well. And so just kind of shifting again and thinking about building community, what's an experience you can share with us where a mentor, coach, or sponsor even has impacted your career at any stage in your career? And how are you now paying it forward to help other women, other people kind of advance, along the same lines. And so I'll start with Josie H. and then Abby.
Thank you. So, well, I think what I could say, what I think the most powerful thing I can share is what I said about creating a network. This job that I have now was really, I see was the vehicle for it was someone who I felt served as a sponsor for me, who recommended me for the job, and really spoke on my behalf when I wasn't there. And that's what sponsorship is. And that only happened for me because I made a choice to get involved. I took the risk to put myself out there, to take a chance and be part of the founding group of Association Latinos. So, and that took a long time for me. You know, as I said, I had been working in associations, wanting to get involved, being involved somewhat, but not at the level I wanted to be. And so that's the one message I can share is, you know, just shorten the time by, if you're here today, that means you're involved. What's the next step that you can take? If you're watching this, that means you're involved. What's the next step you can take to help shorten the time that it takes you to achieve? Because one thing we have is we have the skill set, we have the talent, we know that. There are other things that stand in our way of achieving the careers that we want or advancing in our careers. And so build your community and build your network. And that's how I'm paying it forward, by trying to provide that space and opportunities for other people.
Thank you. Abby?
Yeah, so I mean, my involvement with associations was, you know, I had someone tell me that, hey, you know, there's a lot more that you could be doing, right? And I didn't know that that was something that existed. I didn't know like how involved the association industry was and all the societies and local and state, and there was just a lot to it. And I was kind of overwhelmed where I was in my career. But and to be honest, I think I was just really in my shell a lot too at that point in my life. And so I didn't know if that was the direction I wanted to go in. But I said, you know what, let me just do this one committee position. Let me just see what it's like. And Josie kind of captured it. Like, you have to want to do it, at least a little bit, for it to take you as far as it could possibly take you. And so, you know, that little push of just like, hey, have you considered doing this, was what I needed to get me to where I am. And it kind of was just an exponential growth from there. And so I learned, like, someone encouraging me is how I found my passion. And so I try to be that person for other people that, you know, I work with and that I'm around as much as I can. So, you know, whenever there's an education opportunity or a volunteer opportunity, I share it like everywhere. I mean, I tell everybody I know, this is something, you know, check this out. Whether it's, you know, like Josie said, being here, like just being on this webinar is something, right? And just exposing yourself to all the different opportunities that exist out there. You know, I also try to ask questions and see, like, what is it that people actually want to do? Because I think a lot of people who are in the association world, you know, some of them don't love associations. You know, maybe they love something else. You know, maybe they're in the marketing field and they're like, I love marketing, but I don't know if I love associations that much. And that's okay, because there's plenty of other opportunities that are out there for that specific field. And so I try to ask them, like, well, what do you want to do? Like, what ideas do you have? You know, are you just confused? Like, do you not know where to start at all? Because there's a lot of different ways people can go. So I try to get as much feedback from them first to kind of help an informed kind of explanation or decision for them to make, and then go from there. But there's definitely not a lack of resources out there by any means. I think people just, you have to want to do it and then cultivate those relationships to find the right person to kind of help you get there. So it's kind of a little bit of a balance thing again, but it does start with you as, you know, the individual on the inside, because, you know, if you don't want to do more, then, you know, it's not really going to be enough to get you there. But you know, it doesn't take that much effort to just, you know, sit on a call or read an article or whatever, for that to snowball into something bigger. So it always starts small, and you got to start somewhere.
Thank you. And so I'm just being mindful of the time, and for those joining us or who are on the call with us, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat box for our panelists. But I want to kind of take just this moment to also highlight from our panel, we have two who have recently earned their CAEs. And most recently, an hour before this, Cynthia, who earned the Technology Champion Award. And so along these lines, I want to just kind of go through with each of our panelists, what's next for you and what are you hoping to accomplish professionally in 2023? And I think along the same lines, in just thinking about what are you most proud of? And so this is one of those moments to really celebrate the successes, right, that have come along our way. It's not something that we typically do, right, or sometimes we don't feel comfortable doing. But I think in this, in you know, the association field, we work hard for these moments, right? And so I think this is one of those things I'd really like to just kind of learn from all of you, you know, what's next. And so I'll start with Cynthia to just kind of share what's next for you and what are you hoping to accomplish this year professionally?
The moment you said my name, I was like, there go my dogs.
Oh.
It's funny because the Association Technology Champion Award was recognized for having brought in so many women into the group. So it's easy for me to talk about things that I believe in and that I'm ambitious about, and that I, you know, like I remember one of my first jobs at Circuit City, we would sell insurance, and I never hit my goals because I was like, I don't believe in it. Like, you're never going to get it replaced. But the associations make it easy to have a mission that you believe in. Next for me in 2023 is walking across that stage at annual with my CAE designation one way or another. But I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is being included in this panel. When I got the invitation, it was very humbling. Again, as a mother of 3 girls, I'm always, you know, telling them, advocate for yourself, advocate for yourself. No one's going to put you on the stage. You've got to ask for it. And, you know, we talked about that a lot on the call today. So I think for me is just that, is just being, you know, a part of this panel with these other women and hearing everyone's stories.
Thank you. Sophia?
Yeah, thank you, Marissa. So I would say that in the short term, I would like to improve my soft skills. As I'm sure we can tell, I'm an introverted person, and it's very hard for me to get out of my shell. And I have an incredible mentor that keeps pushing me in the positive way, and I love that. And that's how I ended up in this panel, which is the first one. And one thing is that practicing on my soft skills. Another one, or a couple that I have for this year in regards to certifications, is getting my PMP and the Salesforce administration certification as well. Following down the road by my CPA. I like to leave the last one that I think is the hardest and probably the most rewarding, but I think I have a long path, and I'm going like little by little, but that's the journey that I put myself for, I guess, these next 2 years.
Thank you. Josie, P?
Thanks. So I am in one of my life transitions at the moment, and am very concentrated in making sure that my family life stays stable. And so I'm humbled that I work at an organization that has given me some space to do that. And where I'm looking towards next and this year is really working with Association Latinos, and I'm also giving back with the CAE group, study group. This actually tomorrow we're going to be having a study session on finance where I'm going to be helping them out. So I'm looking to continue to grow my network. If it's, you know, there's anything that women in the or individuals listening to us today, like, it took me a long time to figure out that how key networking is into advancing your career and getting the support of people in your field and making those connections. Because like Sophia, I am also pretty introverted when it comes to going out and meeting new people. So I do a lot of encouragement of my staff to do that as well. And I'm looking forward to, one of my proud moments is being part of the professional development committee with Association Latinos, and being able to work on professional development and helping other individuals continue to grow. And so that's, I'm going to try to take it easy this year, really work on volunteering and networking, and continue to support my organization in their finances.
Thank you. And Abby, and then Josie.
So Sophia, you and I need to talk because I want to get my PMP. I didn't know that you wanted to do it. So we're going to have to talk after this. So I think that's kind of the next like professional milestone that's in the works for me, is just, it's one of those things where like the PMP has a lot of areas that I want to improve on just as a professional. And so it makes sense for me to go after it. So that's one thing I have some other things too professionally, but that's like, I got to sign up for that and do all this. And then as far as kind of like a success story, I don't know. I feel like I have been doing a lot of, my own sort of like introspection and just kind of thinking about where I'm at in my life and, how I've been approaching things. And I think I've come a long way from, who I was like 6 months ago, a year ago. And just my priorities, for like health and work and life and everything like that. So I don't know, it just kind of like Josie, I'm like on a personal journey kind of situation right now. And it's been, an interesting experience, and a really helpful experience, and how I've just been kind of reprioritizing my life. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you. And then Josie.
Thanks. I had kind of forgotten about the success, celebrating the success, but that's important that we do that. And I've had a really transformational year. I mean, and I don't say that like lightly. It really has been. I was accepted, or I'm a DELP scholar. I'm still in my year. Last year I got that, and Association Latinos became a nonprofit, and we have our 501c3 status. And well, I'm the first president as well, and that happened last year. And then I have my first opportunity to serve as executive director, working at Bostrom. So it's been quite a year for me. And next for me is to continue to build and support Association Latinos so that we can create more relationship building spaces like the one today. And that's my commitment for the future. And I also do need to get my CAE as well. So I'm planning on sitting that for that in December. But really, it's just being here, continuing to create community and continuing to share our stories, because our story is your story. And all of the success that we've all accomplished is attainable and accessible for anyone who wants to do it. And we're here to support you.
Thank you so much. So that concludes our webinar. I want to extend a sincere thank you to all of our panelists. Again, thank you so much for accepting and being part of this Women in Associations Roundtable for the month of March, I should say. I also want to extend a note of gratitude to the Board of Association Latinos for their vision and leadership in bringing this together. To everyone on the call, be on the lookout for future Association Latino events. We'll be hosting professional development discussions throughout the year, and you can find those on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. This concludes today's event. And again, thank you all for joining. Any questions you may have, feel free to reach out to the panelists on LinkedIn. And thank you again, and have a great evening. Thank you.